Good luck. Okay, here is the deal. I am going to read this and ask you questions about these two articles, both from the article and about the articles themselves. Point of view. Is this an English teacher kind of test? Yeah, it is an English teacher kind of test. Here we go. Okie dokie. Here we go. There are three articles that you will have all within this one little bit. Little bit. And let's get to it. Okay, why the Chinese should be excluded from 1901. That's one. Another one is called How the Other Half Lives, 1890. And another one is about this era, 1890, 1901. Both of these articles, they're really not even articles. The top two are primary sources. So article like objects from that particular era. And then we have an excerpt about this particular time period in immigration in United States history. And what we're going to do, read through these, and after I'm done reading them, you can start to answer these questions now. But we have three sources. The first two are primary sources. And this last one is a nonfiction. So let's get into it. First one is called Why the Chinese Should Be Excluded. The exclusion acts were limited to 10 years duration. Next May, the latest act will expire and Congress will be asked to renew it. Until now, Chinese exclusion has been regarded in diplomatic circles and elsewhere as the settled policy of the country. Has there been any change in the nature of the evil or in the sentiments of the people? Certainly not on the Pacific coast, where the lapse of time has made still more evident the non-assimilative character of the Chinese and their undesirability as citizens. The Exclusion Act has been reasonably effective, although the Chinese, with more or less success, have employed their well-known cunning in evading its provisions by surreptitiously and fraudulently entering the United States. The influx has been checked. The danger to California has been averted, and consequently, during the last decade, industrial conditions indicate comparative prosperity. It is well known that prior to the exclusion laws, the state of California suffered acutely from labor troubles and business derangement. Unemployed men, hungry from want of work, marched the streets of the cities, inaugurated political parties, and disturbed the peace of communities by riotous outbreaks, which threatened at times the foundations of law and order. Some say the opposition to the Chinese came from demagogues alone. However, the legislature submitted the question of Chinese immigration to a popular vote. For Chinese immigration, 883 votes were polled, and against Chinese immigration, 154,638 votes. This result demonstrated clearly that the resident population of California, taking the broad ground of self-preservation, refused to suffer themselves to be dispossessed of their inheritance by Chinese coolies. The Chinese, by putting a vastly inferior civilization in competition with our own, tend to destroy the population on whom the perpetuity of free government depends. Without homes and families, patronizing neither school, library, church, nor theater, lawbreakers addicted to vicious habits, indifferent to sanitary regulations, and breeding disease, taking no holidays, respecting no traditional anniversaries, but laboring incessantly and subsisting on practically nothing for food and clothes, a condition to which they have been inured for centuries, they enter the lists against men who have been brought up by our civilization to family life and civic duty. Our civilization has been itself rescued from barbarism by the patriots, martyrs, and benefactors of mankind. The question now is, shall it be imperiled? Is not Chinese immigration a harm? The Chinese may be good laborers, but they are not good citizens. They may, in small numbers, benefit individual employers, but they breed the germs of a national disease, which spreads as they spread and grows as they grow. All right. This next piece here is called How the Other Half Lives. Long ago, it was said that one half of the world does not know how the other half lives. That was true then. That half was the half that was on top did not know because it did not care. It didn't care about the struggles and cared even less for what happened to those who were on the bottom. As long as the top half was able to hold them down and keep their own seat, they didn't care. There came a time when the discomfort and crowding on the bottom were too great. The upheavals were so violent that it was no longer easy to hold them down. Then the upper half started to ask, what was the matter? Since then, information on the subject has been growing. The whole world has its hands full answering for its mistakes. In New York, the boundary line of the other half lies through the tenements. Today, 3/4 of its people live in the tenements. The 19th century movement of the population to the cities is making them overcrowded. The 15,000 tenant houses from the past generation have grown to 37,000. They are not sanitary. They are not sanitary. Over 1,200,000 people call them home. We know now that there is no way out. The system that was the evil offspring of public neglect and private greed has come to stay. It's a storm center forever of our civilization. The only option is to make the best of a bad situation. What are the tenements and how did they grow to what they are now? Taken from public records, the story is dark enough to send a chill to any heart. It may appear that the sufferings and the sins of the other half and the evil they breed are a fair punishment upon the community. It appears this way because that is the truth. The boundary line lies there. The forces for good on one side vastly outweigh the bad. In the tenements, all the influences make for evil. They are the hotbeds of the epidemics that carry death to the rich and to the poor alike. They are nurseries of poverty and crime that fill our jails and police courts. They throw off scum of 40,000 humans to the island asylums and workhouses year by year. They turned out, in the last 8 years, around 500,000 beggars to prey upon our charities. They maintain a standing army of 10,000 tramps with all that implies. What are you going to do about it? This is the question of today. A band of defiant political cutthroats asked our city this question. There is a legitimate outgrowth of life on the tenement house level. Law and order found the answer then and won. With our enormously swelling population held in this horrible bondage, will the city always give that answer? It will depend on how fully the city grasps the situation. 40% of the distress among the poor is due to drunkenness. But the first committee ever appointed to look at this issue went deeper and uncovered its roots. The conclusion was that certain conditions of life and living spaces go with certain habits and morals. It recommended the prevention of drunkenness by providing every man a clean and comfortable home. The greed of money that created this evil must undo itself. That is, as far as it can now be undone after this much damage has been done. Homes must be built for the working people by those who hire them. If this is true from a purely economic point of view, what about the outlook from the Christian standpoint? Not long ago, a great meeting was held in the city. There were all denominations of religious faith. They discussed the question of how to influence these tenement masses with Christianity. They are too often strangers to Christian influence. A Brooklyn builder gave a hint worth heeding. How shall the love of God be understood by those who have been only nurtured by the greed of man? And again, because a lot of the questions are based on who the author is, I'm not giving anything away. You're going to have to think on this. All right, so we get to the textbook point of the reading quiz, just one page. That'll give you a background on this entire immigration and anti-immigrant feeling that is going on in this time in the United States and the history of U.S. immigration. All right, and this is a text excerpt from this American history online textbook called The American Yawp. And this is the section about immigration and anti-immigrant feeling. Immigration was another area in which the question of who would be included in the American identity was being explored. Between 1870 and 1920, over 25 million immigrants arrived in the United States. Before the Civil War, most immigrants had come from Northern and Western Europe, including large numbers of Irish and Germans. New groups such as Italians, Poles, and Eastern European Jews made up a larger percentage of the arrivals after the Civil War. Many Chinese came to the United States as well, with most settling on the West Coast. Of these groups, immigrants from Northern and Western Europe were viewed as more American, while Southern and Eastern Europeans and Jewish people faced some discrimination. Chinese immigrants were viewed by many as a completely foreign group, one that needed to be kept from entering the United States altogether. The influx of immigrants stirred nativist or anti-immigrant sentiment among many Americans of Northern and Western European descent. Nativists opposed mass migration or mass immigration for various reasons. One cause was the shift in the source of immigrants from Northern and Western Europe to Southern and Eastern Europe and Asia. Nativists tended to believe the racist ideology of social Darwinism, the idea that certain groups of white people are naturally superior to other groups of people. Since the new arrivals were categorized under social Darwinism as, quote, inferior, the nativists felt that the new arrivals were unfit for American democracy and society. Another factor was economics. Many Americans worried that the immigrants would take their jobs or push down wages. Some people feared that immigrants brought radical ideas such as socialism and communism. The first move for federal immigration control came from California, where racial hostility toward Chinese immigrants had mounted since the mid-19th century. Many white Americans held racist views that Chinese immigrants were racially inferior and would never be a part of true American society. Many charged that these immigrants were hurting American workers by accepting lower wages. In May 1882, Congress suspended the immigration of all Chinese immigrants with the Chinese Exclusion Act. It marked the first time that U.S. immigration law had been used to ban a particular group of people based on their race. Limits on immigration continued to be enacted. Each one was a way to define who could be allowed to enjoy a part of the American dream. In 1885, Congress passed a law banning foreign workers who came to the country under labor contracts with American employers. 6 years later, a new law excluded people who seemed likely to become wards of the state and people with contagious diseases. In 1903, Congress added those who held radical political views. In 1907, the government reached an agreement with Japan's government that blocked immigration from that country. Anti-Catholic feeling grew at this time as well. While Catholics were not prevented from coming into the country, many suffered unfair treatment. And there we go. There's your migration quiz articles. You've got 3, 2 primary sources, 1 nonfiction. Good luck.